The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms held representatives from 12 of the most powerful species in the known universe. Light from distant stars filtered through crystal walls, casting strange shadows across the faces of beings who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Ambassador Lisa Grant stood alone on the human platform. She was a tall woman with gray hair and steady eyes. Behind her, a holographic display showed Earth spinning slowly in the darkness of space. She had served humanity for 40 years, fighting for their place among the stars. Today, she knew that fight was about to end. The Velnorian High Speaker rose from his seat. His body was made of glowing tendrils that shifted colors as he moved. The Velnorians had founded the Galactic Council 3 million years ago. Their word was law. The Council has reached a decision regarding the human species, the High Speaker announced. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder rolling across mountains. After 200 years of observation, we have concluded that humanity presents an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Lisa felt the eyes of every alien in the room turn toward her. Some looked at her with pity, others with satisfaction. The Keth delegates, massive creatures covered in armored plates, made sounds that might have been laughter. Humanity is aggressive, the High Speaker continued. Your species fights wars over resources you do not need. You create weapons capable of destroying worlds. You spread across space like a disease, consuming everything in your path. You are chaos given form, Lisa wanted to argue. She wanted to remind them that humans had cured diseases on 12 worlds, that human engineers had saved the Tesserae homeworld from a dying sun, that human artists had created works that moved species without tear ducts to weep. But she had learned long ago that the Council did not want to hear such things. Therefore, the High Speaker said, humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. Your species is confined to your solar system. Any human vessel that crosses the boundary will be destroyed without warning. Any human found in Council space will be executed. This sentence is permanent and without appeal. The chamber fell silent. 300 alien delegates watched the lone human standing on her platform. They waited for her to beg, to plead, to threaten. Lisa Grant did none of these things. She simply nodded once and said, "We understand." She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. She did not look back. On Earth, the news spread within hours. People gathered in the streets watching massive screens that showed the assembly recording. Some wept, others screamed in anger. Many simply stood in shocked silence, trying to understand what had happened to their future. President Daniel Hayes addressed the world from the steps of the United Nations building in Geneva. He was a young man, only 50 years old, with dark skin and a voice that carried authority. Today we have been told that we are not worthy of walking among the stars, he said. Today we have been told that our passion is a flaw, our determination is a threat, our very nature is a disease. Today, the Galactic Council has made the greatest mistake in their 3-million-year history. The crowd before him grew quiet. Billions more watched from their homes. They have underestimated humanity, Hayes continued. Every empire that has tried to cage us has fallen. Every force that has tried to break us has shattered. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly ended our species. We have climbed from caves to the stars through nothing but our own will and determination. He paused, looking directly into the cameras that broadcast his image across the world. Let them have their council, he said. Let them believe they have one. We will build something greater. We will create a future so bright that their ancient eyes will not be able to look upon it. And when we return to the stars, it will not be as beggars seeking scraps from their table. It will be as equals, or as conquerors. The choice will be theirs. In the weeks that followed, humanity turned inward. The great colony ships that had been spreading human settlements across nearby systems were recalled. Research stations beyond the solar boundary were abandoned. For the first time in 2 centuries, every human in existence lived within the same solar system, but they were not surrendering. They were preparing. Admiral Kevin Torres received his new orders in a secure bunker beneath the surface of Mars. He was an old soldier, scarred by conflicts on 3 worlds. He had expected to retire. Instead, He found himself leading the most important military project in human history. Project Prometheus had been a theoretical concept for decades. The idea was simple. Use every piece of technology humanity had acquired from the Council, combine it with human innovation, and create something entirely new. Something the Council could never anticipate. The Council species had given humanity what they considered harmless scraps: basic fusion reactors, simple communication systems, outdated shield designs from ships that had been obsolete for 100,000 years. They had done this to keep humanity dependent, to ensure that the young species could never truly threaten their dominion. They had no idea what humans could do with scraps. Dr. Maria Santos ran the physics division at Titan Research Station. She was a small woman with wild hair and eyes that seemed to see through solid matter. When she looked at Council technology, she did not see finished products. She saw starting points. They built their systems for elegance, she explained to her team on the first day of the new era. They wanted perfection, stability. They created technology that would work the same way for 1,000,000 years because change frightened them. We are going to take a different approach. She smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. We are going to build things that should not be possible. We are going to break every rule they taught us. And when we are done, we are going to show the galaxy what happens when you try to cage a species that refuses to be caged. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out. Engineers who had been building patrol boats began designing warships. Scientists who had been studying alien biology began searching for weaknesses. Teachers who had been preparing children for lives of peaceful coexistence began telling new stories. Stories of struggle, stories of survival, stories of victory against impossible odds. The exile had begun. The boundary sensors watched Earth's solar system with cold electronic eyes, waiting to destroy any vessel that tried to escape. But inside that prison, humanity was changing, growing, evolving, and somewhere in the depths of the Titan Research Station, Dr. Maria Santos looked at an equation that should have been impossible and began to laugh. The Council had made a terrible mistake. They had given humanity time. They had given humanity motivation. And they had given humanity just enough knowledge to be dangerous. The stars would remember this day. The day the Galactic Council created its own doom. 100 years passed in silence. The Galactic Council checked their boundary sensors from time to time, noting with satisfaction that no human vessels attempted to escape. The young species had accepted their punishment, just as the Council had predicted. Some delegates even suggested that humanity might have collapsed entirely, falling into the civil wars that primitive races often experienced when cut off from galactic civilization. They could not have been more wrong. Inside the solar system, humanity had transformed itself in ways the Council could never have imagined. Every human alive dedicated themselves to a single purpose. Not revenge, not escape. Something far more ambitious. They were building the future. Dr. Samuel Price stood in the main laboratory of the Venus orbital platform, watching his team complete the final tests on humanity's first singularity reactor. The device was small enough to fit in his hand, yet it produced more energy than the Council's largest power stations. The Council gave us fusion technology from their ancient history, Price explained to the young scientists gathered around him. They thought it was harmless, because they had moved beyond it millions of years ago. They never considered that we might find a different path forward. He activated the reactor. Light brighter than the sun filled the chamber for a brief moment, then stabilized into a soft glow. They walked one road to power, Price said. We found another. Ours is better. Across the solar system, similar breakthroughs were happening every day. Engineer Catherine Bell led the team that developed quantum communication networks. The Council used faster-than-light signals that could cross the galaxy in days. Humanity created instant communication across any distance. A message sent from Earth reached receivers on Pluto at the exact same moment it was transmitted. The Council's species have had millions of years to develop their technology, Bell told her engineers. They refined and perfected what they had. They made it elegant and efficient and exactly the same as it was 1,000 generations ago. We do not have the luxury of millions of years. So we will do in 1 century what they could not do in 10,000. The military transformation was even more dramatic. Admiral Patricia Cole took command of the Human Defense Force on her 60th birthday. She was the granddaughter of Kevin Torres, the first commander of Project Prometheus. She had spent her entire life preparing for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Her executive officer, Commander Gary Newman, presented the Fleet M manifest at their first official meeting. The numbers were staggering. 1,200 capital ships, Newman reported. Each one carries weapons that can crack a planet in half. 4,000 cruisers with shields that can withstand anything the Council has ever built. 15,000 destroyers fast enough to cross the solar system in minutes. And the Vanguard-class carriers, Cole nodded slowly. The Council's entire combined fleet numbers around 2,000 vessels. Most of them are ceremonial. They have not built a true warship in 10,000 years. They've forgotten what conflict looks like, Newman said. We will remind them. On the colony world of New Seattle, a massive station orbiting Jupiter, young pilot Lucas Grant completed his training exercises. He flew fighters that moved like thoughts, responding to his commands before he even finished forming them. His instructors told him he was the best pilot in human history. Lucas did not care about being the best. He cared about something else entirely. His great-grandmother had been Lisa Grant, the ambassador who stood alone before the Council on the day of exile. She had died 20 years ago, never seeing the stars beyond the solar system again. Lucas had grown up on stories of that day. Stories of how she had stood with dignity while 12 species pronounced humanity unworthy. He would make them regret those words. The research divisions continued their work in secret. Dr. Ellen Perry led a team of 300 scientists in the deepest levels of a facility hidden inside an asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. They were developing the weapon that would ensure humanity never faced exile again. They called it the Cascade Nullifier. The Council species all use the same basic technology, Perry explained to her team. They share everything with each other. Their shields, their weapons, their engines all work on the same fundamental principles. They have done this for millions of years because they trusted each other completely. She brought up a holographic display showing the structure of Council technology. We are going to use that trust against them. The Cascade Nullifier broadcasts a specific quantum frequency that disrupts any technology based on Council designs. One ship carrying this device can disable an entire enemy fleet in seconds. A young scientist raised her hand. What about our own technology? Will it affect us? Perry smiled. Our technology is not based on Council designs. We threw away their blueprints decades ago. We built everything from scratch, using principles they have never seen. When the Cascade Nullifier activates, their ships will become dead metal floating in space. Ours will be completely unaffected. The decades continued to pass. Children grew up and had children of their own. The first generation to be born after the exile grew old and passed away. New generations rose who had never known any life, set preparation for the day humanity would return to the stars. Education changed completely. Every child learned science and engineering alongside reading and mathematics. Every teenager spent time in military training not because humanity wanted soldiers, because they wanted citizens who understood sacrifice and discipline. Every adult contributed to the great project in whatever way they could, and slowly, quietly, the fleet grew. Admiral Cole reviewed the final status reports on the day before her 95th birthday. The century of preparation was almost complete. We are ready, Newman told her. He was old now, too, his hair white and his movements slow. But his eyes still burned with the same fire they had shown 60 years ago. Yes, Cole agreed. We are ready. But we will not strike first. That is not who we are. Then how will it begin? Cole looked out the window of her command center at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Council believed humanity was broken, defeated, forgotten. We will wait for them to give us a reason, she said. And they will. Species that powerful always grow careless. They will do something that justifies our response. And when that day comes, the galaxy will learn what humanity has become. She paused, and a smile crossed her aged face. They exiled us because they feared what we might become. They should have destroyed us instead, because what we have become is beyond anything they could have imagined in their worst nightmares. The silent century was ending. The boundary sensors continued their watch. Seeing nothing but empty space around a quiet solar system, they had no idea that behind that silence, the greatest military force in galactic history was waiting, preparing, growing, hungry. The stars would soon remember why humanity had once been feared. The distress call came on a quiet morning from the edge of Council Space. A Keth Dominion mining colony had detected something impossible. Ships were approaching from the direction of the forbidden zone around humanity's solar system. But these were not the primitive vessels the Council remembered. These were monsters of metal and light, each one larger than anything the galaxy had seen in a million years. Unknown configuration, the colony administrator reported, his armored voice trembling. They are not responding to communication attempts. They are enormous. Request immediate military assistance. The Council dispatched a response fleet of 30 warships. The Velnorian commander, a veteran named Thelkar, was confident that whatever pirates or rogue elements had appeared could be easily destroyed. His ships had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds. They had maintained galactic peace for longer than most species had existed. They had never faced humans. The human First Expeditionary Fleet waited in perfect formation near the mining colony. Admiral Stephen Hart stood on the bridge of the HSV Defiance, watching the Council vessels emerge from their faster-than-light jumps. His crew moved with calm efficiency around him, each person exactly where they needed to be. 30 ships, his tactical officer reported. Standard Council configuration. Weapons are charging. Hart nodded. Open a channel. Lieutenant Diana Ross, the communications officer, activated the broadcast system. Her fingers moved across controls that looked nothing like anything the Council had ever designed. Attention Council Fleet, Hart announced. His voice carried across space to every ship in the system. This is Admiral Stephen Hart of the Human Star Navy. We have secured this system in accordance with our new territorial claims. You will withdraw immediately. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Thelkar's response came, filled with disbelief and contempt. Humans, you were exiled. You are forbidden from leaving your system. Your presence here is a violation of galactic law. Stand down and prepare to be escorted back to your boundaries. If you resist, you will be destroyed. Hart looked around his bridge at his crew. Young men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Descendants of the exiled. Children of a species that had been told it was not worthy of the stars. We do not recognize those boundaries anymore, Hart said. Thelkar's response was immediate. All ships, weapons free. Destroy the human vessels. 30 Council warships opened fire. Energy beams that could cut through mountains lanced across space toward the human fleet. Missiles designed to crack planetary crusts screamed through the void. None of them reached their targets. The human shields absorbed every attack without flickering. The energy simply disappeared, converted into power that fed back into the ship's reactors. The missiles were caught by point defense systems so fast that Council sensors could not even track them. They are not damaged, a Keth officer reported, his voice confused. Our weapons have no effect. This is impossible. Hart watched the Council fleet continue their useless assault. He felt something that might have been pity. These beings had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had no idea how far behind they had fallen. Activate the Cascade Nullifier, he ordered. Deep in the Defiance, a device smaller than a human fist began to pulse. It broadcast a signal across every frequency known to galactic science. The signal was harmless to human technology. But to anything based on Council designs, it was death. Every Council ship went dark at the same moment. Shields failed. Weapons powered down. Engines stopped. Life support switched to emergency reserves that would last only a few hours. In 60 seconds, 30 advanced warships became 30 coffins drifting through empty space. On the bridge of Thelkar's flagship, Emergency lights cast red shadows across terrified faces. The Velnorian commander tried to activate his communication system, but nothing responded. His ship was dead. A human shuttle approached his vessel. Soldiers in armor that seemed to drink light entered through an airlock they cut open with tools the Council had never seen. Hart's voice came through speakers, powered by a portable human generator. Crews will be returned safely, too. Council space, the Admiral announced. Your ships will be kept as war prizes, but you will carry a message to your masters. Thelkar found his voice. What message? Humanity is no longer asking for a seat at the table. We are building our own table. Any species that wishes to join us in mutual respect and cooperation is welcome. Any species that attempts to confine us again will learn why we were feared in the first place. The Council crews were transported to the mining colony and left with enough supplies to survive until rescue arrived. The 30 dead warships were towed back to human space for study. News of the incident spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The Council convened an emergency session, their first true crisis in thousands of years. They have a pawns we cannot understand, a Solari delegate reported. Technology that should not exist. Their ships are faster, stronger, and more numerous than anything we possess. The Velnorian High Speaker refused to show fear. They are still humans. Still the same aggressive, chaotic species we exiled a century ago. We will gather our full forces and crush them. But other voices disagreed. On Earth, President Maria Gonzalez addressed the unified human government. She was a grandmother now, but her voice still carried the strength of her ancestors. We do not want war, she said. We never did. Humanity has always reached for connection, for understanding, for friendship with other beings. The Council denied us that chance 100 years ago. They called us dangerous because we were different. They called us chaotic because we changed while they stayed the same. She paused, looking at the cameras that broadcast her image to every human in existence. We will not be caged. We will not be diminished. We will not be afraid. But we will also not become what they accused us of being. We will offer peace to any species that wants it. We will extend friendship to any being who reaches back. And we will build a future where no species is exiled simply for being what they are. Within weeks, the first cracks appeared in the Council's unity. The Solari Confederation sent a secret message to Earth, requesting a private diplomatic channel. They were scientists and artists, and they had always felt uncomfortable with the Council's rigid rules. The humans intrigued them. Then the Mori Republic made contact. Then the Tesseri. Then 6 other species who had grown tired of being told that change was forbidden. Progress was dangerous. The Council was fracturing. And humanity was just getting started. Admiral Hart watched from his command center as diplomatic ships began arriving in human space. Former enemies were becoming potential allies. The galaxy was waking up from a sleep that had lasted millions of years. What do we do now? Lieutenant Ross asked him. Hart smiled. Now we show them that the Council was wrong. We show them that humans are not a disease to be contained. We are a spark that can light fires across every world. We are the species that was exiled for dreaming too big. And now we are going to teach the whole galaxy how to dream again. The stars were changing, and humanity was leading the way. 3 years had passed since the battle that changed everything. Ambassador Nathan Cole stood in the Grand Hall of New Geneva, a massive space station humanity had built specifically for this moment. The station orbited Saturn, its rings visible through crystal windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Representatives from 14 species filled the chamber. Beings of light and stone and crystal and flesh, all gathered to witness the birth of something new. Nathan was the son of Admiral Patricia Cole, the woman who had built the fleet that freed humanity. He had grown up surrounded by war preparations, training exercises, and endless planning for a conflict everyone hoped would never come. Now he stood at the center of a different kind of revolution. The Coalition of Free Worlds, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, is hereby established today. We are not an empire. We are not a council that excludes and punishes. We are a partnership of equals, united by shared principles rather than shared fear. The Solari delegate rose from her seat. Vintara was a being of living crystal, her body catching the light and scattering it into rainbows across the walls. She had been the first alien to reach out to humanity after the battle. Now she spoke for all the species who had abandoned the old council. For too long, we accepted stagnation as stability, Ventera said. We were taught that change was dangerous, that innovation was a threat, that the best we could hope for was to preserve what we already had. Humanity has reminded us what progress looks like. They have shown us that fear of the future is the only true danger. Applause filled the chamber. Beings who had never touched before reached out to their neighbors. Species who had been rivals for millions of years smiled at each other with eyes that had learned to see differently. The old Galactic Council had shrunk to 4 members. The Valnorians still led them, but their power was fading with each passing day. They had attempted 2 more military responses against human expansion. Both had ended in humiliating defeats without a single human casualty. The first attempt had been a fleet of 200 ships, the largest force the Council had assembled in 1,000 years. The human Third Fleet had destroyed them in less than an hour. The second attempt had been a sneak attack on a human colony, hoping to capture civilians as hostages. Colonel Ryan Peters and his ground forces had been waiting. Not a single alien soldier survived. But humanity's greatest victories were not happening on battlefields. Lieutenant Commander Sandra Lee commanded the carrier group that broke the blockade of the Tessari homeworld. The Tessari had been under Valnorian protection for 8,000 years, which meant they had been prisoners for 8,000 years. When human ships arrived, the Tessari wept with joy. Their children had grown up hearing stories of a species that had refused to submit. Now those stories were saving their world. On Mori Prime, the Human Liberation Force discovered something that changed everything. The Mori had once been a creative species, producing art and music that had moved the entire galaxy. The Council had decided that such creativity was destabilizing. For 10,000 years, the Mori had been forbidden to create anything new. Their greatest artists had been executed. Their most beautiful works had been destroyed. Colonel Peters walked through the ruins of a Mori museum, looking at empty frames where paintings had once hung. A young Mori child followed him, her large eyes filled with questions she had never been allowed to ask. Why did they do this? She asked. Peters knelt beside her. Because they were afraid? They were afraid of what you might become. They were afraid that if you kept creating new things, you might create something that would change everything. Is that bad? No, Peters said. That is the most beautiful thing any species can do. And now you are free to do it again. The child smiled, and Peters felt something shift in his heart. This was why they had fought. This was why humanity had spent a century building weapons and training soldiers. Not for conquest. Not for revenge. For this moment, when a child could smile at the thought of a future full of possibilities. Dr. Henry Adams had spent decades studying why the Council species had stopped growing. He was humanity's leading expert on alien cultures, and his findings were revolutionary. The Council created a galaxy-wide paralysis, Adams explained to the Coalition Assembly. They taught every species that the best they could be was what they already were. Innovation was dangerous. Ambition was a flaw. Dreams were diseases that needed to be cured. Species capable of greatness were turned into shadows of what they could have been. He brought up images of the galaxy before the Council's rise. Countless civilizations reaching for the stars. Art and science and philosophy blooming on 1,000,000 worlds. Then the Council established order, Adams continued. And order became control. And control became suffocation. For 3 million years, the galaxy has been slowly dying. Its greatest minds taught to think small, its boldest spirits broken into submission. Wait. He paused. Looking at the alien delegates who listened with growing understanding, humanity does not succeed because we are smarter or stronger than other species. We succeed because we never stop trying. We fail, and we learn from our failures. We adapt to challenges instead of running from them. The Council taught its members to stop taking risks. We are teaching the galaxy to dream again. The effect was immediate and powerful. On Silurai Prime, young scientists began publishing research papers that challenged long-held assumptions about physics. Their elders were shocked, but the young ones did not care. They had met humans who questioned everything. They wanted to be like them. The Keth Dominion had been fierce warriors before the Council tamed them. Now, their young people began training again, not for war, but for the challenge of pushing their bodies and minds to their limits. They organized competitions that had been forbidden for millennia. They laughed and struggled and failed and tried again. Tessari artists created works that shocked and delighted. Their traditionally conservative culture, a painter named Kelver produced an image that showed the moment of liberation. Human soldiers standing beside weeping Tessari as chains fell from their hands. The painting spread across the galaxy within days. The remaining council members watched their influence crumble. Everything they had built over 3 million years was dissolving like morning mist in sunlight. The Velnorians sent one final message to Earth. The High Speaker himself spoke, his glowing tendrils dark with anger and fear. "You are destroying galactic civilization," he declared. "You are unleashing chaos that will consume everything. We demand that you cease corrupting the species under our protection. Return to your boundaries and accept your place in the order of things." President Luis Ramirez read the message with his cabinet gathered around him. He was a quiet man who preferred books to speeches, but his response would echo through history. "We will send a simple reply," he said. The message that reached the council contained only 4 words: "Come and stop us." They never did. The coalition continued to grow. Species that had forgotten how to hope, beg, and to remember. Worlds that had been silent for thousands of years began to sing again. And at the center of it all stood humanity, not as rulers or conquerors, but as teachers and friends. Ambassador Nathan Cole watched the sunset through the windows of New Geneva as the first coalition session ended. 14 species had signed the founding charter. More would follow. "What happens now?" Ventara asked him. Nathan smiled. "Now we build something the galaxy has never seen. A civilization based on growth instead of stagnation. On cooperation instead of control. On the simple belief that every species deserves the chance to become whatever they dream of being. The Council will fight this. The Council has already lost. They just do not know it yet." The stars burned bright beyond the windows, and for the first time in millions of years, they looked like hope instead of prison bars. 200 years had passed since the exile. The galaxy that Ambassador Lisa Grant had known no longer existed. The Galactic Council survived only in history files and museum displays. The coalition of free worlds had grown to include 47 species, spreading across a region of space so vast that light itself took centuries to cross it. Admiral Christina Hayes stood at the memorial on Luna, Earth's ancient moon. The structure rose from gray dust toward black sky, a wall of polished stone carved with thousands of names. These were the humans who had made the transformation possible. Scientists who had unlocked impossible technologies. Soldiers who had fought and died for freedom. Diplomats who had turned enemies into friends. Ordinary citizens who had simply refused to accept that their species was lesser than any other. Near the top of the wall, Christina found the name she was looking for. Lisa Grant, her great-great-grandmother. The ambassador who had stood alone before 12 species and accepted exile with dignity that had become legend. "The Velnorians have requested another meeting," said Captain Derek Morrison, Christina's aide. He was a young man with serious eyes and a quick mind. They want to discuss terms for joining the coalition. Christina smiled at the irony. The species that had once pronounced humanity unworthy of galactic civilization now came begging for shelter under the same banner they had tried to destroy. "Schedule it," she said, "and make sure they are treated with respect. We are not them. We do not punish species for the mistakes of past generations." Derek nodded and stepped away to make the arrangements. Christina remained at the memorial, her hand resting gently on the stone. The Velnorian Empire had not fallen to human weapons. Their cities had not burned. Their people had not been conquered. They had simply become irrelevant. Their rigid rules and ancient traditions meant nothing in a galaxy that had learned to value change. Their citizens fled to coalition worlds by the millions, drawn by opportunity and freedom that the old empire could never provide. The proud civilization that had ruled for 3 million years had slowly, quietly withered away across the galaxy. Human influence was visible everywhere, but not in the ways the old council had feared. There were no conquered peoples, no subjugated worlds, no human governors ruling alien populations with iron fists. Instead, there were schools on 1,000 planets teaching problem-solving methods that had once been uniquely human. Research stations where scientists of 20 species worked together on challenges that would have seemed impossible to the stagnant council. Trade routes connecting worlds that had never interacted before. Carrying goods and ideas and dreams between species that were learning to see each other as friends. The human military remained powerful, but it had not fired a shot in anger for 50 years. Admiral Hayes commanded the largest fleet in galactic history, yet her ships spent most of their time providing disaster relief, escorting science expeditions, and protecting trade convoys from the occasional pirate band. We built weapons that could destroy stars, she had told the Coalition Assembly at her promotion ceremony. We built them because we had to. Because we were alone and afraid and surrounded by beings who wanted to cage us forever. But weapons are not who we are. They never were. We are builders and dreamers and explorers. The weapons were just tools we needed to survive long enough to show the galaxy what we truly wanted to become. Commander Rachel Morrison piloted her exploration vessel beyond the edge of known space, continuing the eternal human push into the unknown. Her crew of 12 included 6 different species, all volunteers who had chosen to seek new frontiers together. There was a Solari, scientist named Torvin, who studied stars with instruments of his own design. A Keth warrior named Breck, who had discovered a passion for poetry during his time on human worlds. A Tesserae artist who painted everything she saw, creating a visual record of places no living being had visited before. They were the future. Not just humanity's future, but the galaxy's. A future where species worked together instead of competing. Where differences were celebrated instead of feared. Where the stars belonged to everyone brave enough to reach for them. On Earth. The old United Nations building had become a museum. School children from every coalition species toured its halls, learning about the time when humanity had been divided into nations, then united by exile, then expanded to embrace the galaxy. A young human girl named Sophie walked through the exhibits with her class. She had green eyes and brown hair, and a curiosity that her teachers found both delightful and exhausting. She stopped before a display showing the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, as it had looked on the day of exile. Why did they think humans were dangerous? She asked her teacher, Professor Walter Klein. He was an elderly man who had spent his life studying the history of first contact between species. He considered the question carefully before answering. Because we were different, he said. We changed when others remained the same. We questioned when others accepted. We reached for more when others were satisfied with less. That frightened them. They had spent millions of years building a galaxy where nothing ever changed. And then we appeared and showed them that change was possible. They did not know how to handle that. But we are not scary, Sophie said. Professor Klein smiled. No, we are not. We are just human. And it turns out, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. In orbit above Earth, the HSV Defiance had been preserved as a monument. The ship that had first announced humanity's return to galactic affairs now served as a museum, a reminder of how far they had come. Visitors from across the coalition came to walk its corridors and see where history had changed. The bridge had been kept exactly as it was on the day of first contact. Admiral Hart's command chair still faced the view screen. Lieutenant Ross's communication station still displayed the logs from that fateful encounter. The Cascade nullifier that had disabled the Council fleet sat in a glass case, small and ordinary-looking, yet responsible for ending millions of years of stagnation. Above the main entrance, carved in stone that would last forever, were words written in every language known to the Coalition. We were exiled because they feared what we might become. We return to show them what we are. Now we walk among the stars, not as conquerors, but as friends. Not as rulers, but as equals. Not because we demanded it, but because we earned it. Admiral Hayes finished her visit to the memorial and returned to her shuttle. As she rose through Earth's atmosphere, she looked down at the blue-green world that had given birth to her species. It seemed so small from up here, so fragile, so beautiful. She thought about Lisa Grant standing alone before the council, accepting exile without pleading or threatening. She thought about Dr. Maria Santos laughing at equations that should have been impossible. She thought about Admiral Hart announcing to the galaxy that humanity had returned. She thought about all the soldiers and scientists and diplomats who'd given everything so that future generations could live free. The stars spread out before her as her shuttle cleared the atmosphere. Countless suns burning in the darkness. Countless worlds waiting to be explored. Countless species learning to dream again. "What are you thinking about?" Derek asked. Christina smiled. "I am thinking about how lucky we are. Not because we are powerful, not because we command the largest fleet in history, but because we got to be the ones who showed the galaxy a different way. We got to be the ones who proved that change is not something to fear. We got to be the ones who lit the spark." She looked out at the stars, and for a moment, she could almost see her great-great-grandmother looking back at her, smiling with pride. "They exiled us because they thought we were a disease," Christina said softly. "They were wrong. We were the cure." The shuttle turned toward the moon, toward the memorial, where thousands of names were carved in stone. Behind them, Earth turned slowly in the light of its ancient sun. Before them, the galaxy stretched out in every direction, vast and full of wonder. The stars had once seemed closed to humanity. Now they belonged to everyone, and humanity had made it so. The story was not over. It would never be over. There would always be new frontiers to explore, new challenges to face, new dreams to pursue. That was the human way, the way humanity had taught to the galaxy, and somewhere out in the darkness, beyond the edge of known space, Commander Rachel Morrison and her crew pressed forward into the unknown, carrying the torch that would never stop burning.